You're listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 50. Listen as I, a young choir director, and my husband, a young composer, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Christian.
And I'm Kara.
And here we are, the final episode of Season 2 of Beyond the Measure, a podcast for music educators. We hope that you have really enjoyed all of the incredible guests that we have had on the show this season, and we can't wait to start interviewing guests for Season 3 over the summer here. If you're a music teacher and you are powering through, I'm sure at this point, at this point, probably only a couple weeks left. Maybe some of you are already almost on your final week at this point in the school year. We know this episode will be releasing at that time, and so just keep pushing through. You can do it. We're cheering you on. And Kara, I'm sure at this time you'll be powering through as well in your last few weeks.
Yeah, I guess so.
We're recording this, back in the fall, so it's kind of weird to think about that, but it's going to be here before we know it. So, well, there's a reason that we saved this episode as our final episode. I guess you could say the finale of Season 2. This is a special one. This is a special guest for me because this was my choir director. This is Miss Brenda Justice. She was my choir director my junior and senior years of high school at Rouse High School. And those are the only 2 years I was in choir. My very first year in choir was my junior year at Rouse. And man, you're going to hear about it in the interview, but this is the experience that changed my life and really set me on the path to where I am today as a composer and as a musician, as a singer. And man, just everything that I think about goes back to my experience in choir. And Miss Justice was just a huge part of that because she was the one that defined the culture in our classroom. And that's actually one of the big things that we talk about in this interview is how can you make a culture in your choir that is honestly so fun and welcoming and friendly that you almost don't even need all the extra fluff outside of the classroom. She actually mentions this, that we really didn't have a lot of extra activities outside of class days. And I can tell you from my own experience, I never really noticed that either because it was always just so fun to be in choir, and she was always just so welcoming and friendly, and we still had a really high achievement in how we did as a group. It was still a very good group of singers, but she talks a lot about, and you'll hear it in the interview, about how it really affected the recruitment and the retention in a really positive way. When you just make the classroom culture such a great place to be that nobody wants to leave, then hey, you're in great shape and you're going to continue to see your program grow.
I didn't get to meet Mrs. Justice until I was in college with Christian, and the few times that we met, it was either at TMEA or if we went home to see one of his brother or sisters at football games, and she always just had such encouraging things to say to me as a future music educator, and even with the few interactions that I've had with her, she's also impacted me in such a good way.
Yeah, and that's the case with so many people. And so, I've talked long enough about this, and you'll hear all about it in the interview. So once again, thank you all so much for listening, not just this episode, but the entirety of Season 2. Once again, we're really excited to get going into Season 3 here in a few months. But if you've enjoyed it this season, please leave us a review and a rating, and hey, share it with other music educators that you know would benefit from this. And I guess we'll get right into it. The finale of Season 2. Here's our interview with Mrs. Brenda Justice.
See you next fall.
Mrs. Justice, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I have to just start by saying, so I'm sure I've already said this in the intro at this point, but you were my high school choir director, and you just told me recently, hey, call me Brenda. And I don't know if I can ever call you Brenda because you were my choir director and you will always be Mrs. Justice to me. But thank you so much for being on the show.
A lot of people say that to me, a lot of former students, but it's so funny. In my new job now that I'm not a choir teacher. When anybody calls me Mrs. Justice, it's so weird. I'm like, what? That's not what I do anymore. I'm not Mrs. Justice anymore. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of others would agree with me, and I've mentioned you on previous podcast episodes before because we've both talked about our own individual stories and how we got involved in music, and you played such a big role in how I got involved in choir and grew as a musician and ultimately just found people to be a part of, right? To be with in high school, and so I'm really excited to have you here today. But for those listening, could you just tell us what you have done in the music field, and then you can tell us kind of your story, how you got into music, and you can be as detailed with that as you want.
sure. Right out of college, I was pregnant with my second baby. So I took a job when she was about, well, I was doing a church little children's choir, which is really fun, preschoolers and early elementary. And it's just a way to just keep doing music a little bit. And then when she was ready to kind of spend a couple of days in preschool with other kids, I took a job teaching K2 elementary music. And mostly kindergartners, a little bit of second grade. Oh, and then I also had they called it like behavioral class, but it was literally a class of like 10 kids that were really challenging to teach. That was literally my first teaching experience, kindergarten, second grade, and very challenging elementary students. And I learned so much. Just learned a lot about how to interact with people. You think you know that, but you don't know it until you have to. And then moved to South Dakota, and there is a private Christian school at our church, and they would give us free tuition for our oldest and free preschool for our youngest. And we were like, that sounds good. So I taught K8 music and started a worship choir there, which was really fun. The worship team, those kids are all like grown-ups now with kids of their own, and put on big lavish church musicals at Christmas time and in the spring, and loved that. Did that for about 3 years and then moved to Texas. And I was crying on the plane going, what am I going to do in Texas? There's no job for me. Jeff had a job at Dell. I didn't have a job. And I was like, I don't know anybody at Dell. What am I going to, God, what do you have for me in Texas? And so I was like, I'm not going to teach. I'm just going to get my family kind of settled, and got bored and decided to substitute teach. And my first day substitute teaching was middle school band at Leander Middle School. And the choir teacher says, hey, you're choir, right? I said, yeah, well, we need a long-term choir sub at Cedar Park Middle School. Do you want to do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And I did it. And I was at Cedar Park Middle School for 7 years, had a TMEA choir that was super fun. I learned a lot from that. I did not intend to get a TMEA choir. The head director at Cedar Park High School said, hey, I'm submitting, you submit. Usually takes 5 or 6 years, so it's not going to happen. No big deal. And it happened, and I was just not prepared, but we worked it out, and it was a great memory. And many of those kids are professional musicians now, and that's a really fun memory. And I get to see them and see their careers and they're doing now. And then I went to Cedar Park High School after TMEA choir. It's kind of hard to stay in the same place for me, especially at the middle school level, because I was like, well, what else do I have to learn? So I went to Cedar Park High School for 3 years, and then I stopped teaching for a little bit to be home with my youngest daughter as she was starting high school. And then I felt the itch again, and Rouse was about to open, and I knew the principal, and I called her and said, maybe, but I'm going to flip high school choir on its head. I have an idea. And so I sat down with her and I said, I want to flip it upside down. I don't want it to be about everybody getting in the top group and that's the only thing that happens. I want to focus on the JV kids, and I want choir to be a place where anybody who can behave, that qualifier, anybody who wants to be there can be in choir, and we will welcome them, and there'll be a place for them and they can belong. And I just really felt that time I took off between Cedar Park Middle School and Rouse, or Cedar Park High School and Rouse, I really just, I don't know, I can talk about Jesus now because I'm not a public school teacher. I just really felt God was really working with me about, just building a vision in me, building a dream for what it could be like. I really, I can handle the competition. I love the competition. Really fun to teach an all-state kid or a kid like Kara who wants to be a music educator. That's fun. But I also felt that there was just really more to it, that if public school is my mission field, then I shouldn't be catering just to those kids.
Right.
Those kids should have an excellent experience, but I should be seeing whoever comes in my room. I just, my whole time, I just felt like whoever God brings in my room, there's a reason why they're there. And it might not be to make them be an all-stater. And so I just flat out told the principal I was hiring with, this is my plan. This is my idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but that's what I want to do. And she went, that's cool, you're hired. And so Rouse opened with 4 boys and 26 girls. And in January, we had doubled to 8 boys. And the 26 girls were at about 30 at that point. And woof, they couldn't start reading because the middle school was new too, and was a new teacher, Mrs. Ard. And you know, Kara, that you can be successful because of what you learn in college, but until someone shows you, sight read this,
Right.
do it
Yeah.
this way, do it in this order, it's very hard to be successful figuring it out on your own. So I went, well, shoot, I taught 7 years of middle school. Here you go, Becky, here's a plan. And of course, Becky's brilliant, and she ran with it and had a tremendous success with the program. And so that's what I did. And then I was at Rouse, I don't know, 16, 17 years. And I'm really proud because the program was big, and there was usually at about 45% guys, 55% girls. So there was not a big begging people to be in choir. In fact, I didn't beg anybody to be in choir. And the other thing I saw was when I first opened Rouse, my peers were like, it's not going to work. It's not how we do it. You're going to change your mind and you're going to go back to how we do it because this works. And then they started to see my program grow and be successful. And we were building something really cool. And within about 5 years, I felt like the whole landscape of Leander ISD choral changed. Now, some of my peers were very much about the uber competitive top group. I want lots of all-staters, and I don't even fault them for that. But that focus on the JV level, bring in someone that'll really work with the JV kids and help kids feel welcome. The other big change I made was I stopped doing so much extra stuff. We kind of did skating in the fall. There was a musical, there was all of those extra activities you could be part of, but I didn't have a lot of extra activities for the students to participate in. That the whole focus was not, you have to come late or you have to come early. It was, in the classroom, you belong. And so that was where my peers were really worried. They were like, you're not going to be able to keep kids in choir if you don't do lots and lots of extra flash and parties and this and that. And I'm like, well, let's see what happens. And it turned out great. And I do have had some students that were like, hey, how come we don't do all these extra things? And, I'm like, well, you should do them. Get your friends together and go do them. Send me pictures.
Right. Definitely.
But that was one way that I was able to balance home life and work life. It's still impossible if you're a high school choir teacher. It just is. But it was a way to give me a little more balance to be with my husband and my children, to kind of go, all right, I'm not every few weeks something extra with the students. So that was it. I loved it. It was great. I'm going to tell you about Christian when I met him. Christian joined beginning music theory, and I wasn't even his teacher. Mrs. Rhodes was his teacher, but you could see that he had this uber love of music, and he had this great skill set and great ear for it, but he didn't know what to do with it. If that makes sense. And plus, he's a pretty cool human being, so that was really fun to get to know him, and we just kind of did for Christian like we did with all the choir kids. We did that with our theory kids as well. Just, hey, you can come to this room. That's fine. You can be here. We want to know you. What do you like? What music are you interested in? And Christian was never going to be an all-stater, but he has a really good voice. But I think you tried for the all-state process once, right?
No, I didn't. In fact, I tell most people, I don't think I even really knew what the all-state process was most of my time in choir.
Yeah. I mean, we would talk about it, but because it was just not, I always kind of had 2 paths. One path was for kids that just like to sing, or they just want to be part of something. And then there's another path where I want to be an all-stater. I want to be a music major. I want to be all of these things. I want to be involved in everything. And I think we did a really good job of addressing both paths for people. And I don't think we ever had the people that were not the uber competitive ones feel less than. I wanted them to feel challenged and supported. And honestly, I used Mary Kaiser, our voice teacher, a lot in that area. I mean, Julie and I would do sectionals and work and extra and prepare the kids as best we could. But we have a championship voice teacher. You should have her on someday to have her talk about vocal technique, because that woman's a genius. And she really was the one that kind of helped those kids that needed that extra oomph and that extra challenge and that extra support. We would give them with the literature and in their varsity choirs, but she gave it to them one-on-one. So that was kind of it. And towards the end of my career, for the last 5 years, I kept telling people I'm not going to make it. And they're like, what? You're great. You love it. The kids are awesome. And I'm like, I do love the kids. They're awesome. And if I could just be in the choir room the whole time and that door never opened unless the kids came in or went out, that would be great. And nobody believed me. And I'm like, it's coming close. And I was even telling Julie, I'm like, Julie, I'm not sure. I'm ready to do something else. And no, you'll be fine. You only have to do 6 more years. Well, 6 more years sounded like a long time to me back then. So 2020, I left and I became a nanny, and I'm a super baby lover, super baby lover. And so I literally got paid to cuddle baby and stayed with her till she was about 2.5. And then I got recruited by a super wealthy family in the area to ask me to be an executive admin for them and then an estate manager. I have a really great resume for transitioning from teaching to something other than teaching that really describes all the things we do that have nothing to do with music.
Yeah.
All of the project management and creating websites and blah, everything, throw technology at us, we'll figure it out. So I did that, and they found that resume, and that's how I got that job. Did that for about 9 months. That was incredibly interesting, and I learned a lot. And then I just went, okay, that's another job that's taken a whole lot of time and a whole lot of hours. And it was essentially expected to be 24/7 on if they needed me. So I told them, okay, this was great. Find someone else. I'll stay here till you do. And then I took a job 4 miles from my house. How about that? No commute.
Nice.
When I was applying, I told my husband, I said, I'm only applying for jobs in Cedar Park and Leander. I am not driving to Austin anymore. And I work in oil and gas manufacturing. How weird is that? I know nothing about manufacturing. I'm an executive admin, but my boss is a super cool dude. And he's like, I don't really need a whole lot of support. So your job is to find people who need help and help them. And so, of course, I support him and help him. And now I do all kinds of cool stuff for all kinds of cool people. And they'll come to me with all these weird 3-letter things and stuff about manufacturing. I'm like, I didn't learn that in music school. So you're going to have to tell me what we're talking about. And that's what I do. And it's literally like a 9-to-5er with the most lovely human beings. And you realize how very similar all teachers are, no matter what subject they teach, because they just love education. So it's really fun to be in an environment with completely different human beings than that. But they always want me to sing, and they want me to start a choir, and they want me to start a band. And I'm like, thanks, but not right now.
Yeah. I've left that life behind me.
There you go. So that's kind of it. Growing up, I always loved to sing. My parents would be like, Brenda, it's time for dinner. You need to stop singing now. All right, Brenda, you can sing and put your shoes on. And the piano for me is like a video game. It's like a beast to be conquered. And so I loved that. I spent a lot of time at the piano, and my parents are not wealthy people. They lived paycheck to paycheck. My dad's an auto mechanic, and he would find a piano teacher who needed work on her cars, and he would barter lessons. And so I had a lot of different piano teachers, but I learned a lot. And so it worked out great, and used piano in college a lot. I would accompany for people who were like beginning music majors with the easier literature, and make enough money to pay for my accompanist with a little more difficult literature as I was, my junior and senior year. So that's it. My husband in high school choir. That's how much of a choir nerd I am. He was sitting a chair away from me, end of the tenors, and I was end of the altos. And my friend Jenna DeLand said, I'm sitting next to Jeff. He's cute. And I'm like, you have a boyfriend, trade places. And now we've been married 38 years. And so he loves to sing. He has perfect pitch. How about that for an engineer?
Oh, boy.
It's annoying. If you sing a song from the radio, he'll be like, actually, it's here. He's right. every time.
Wow, that's great. Well, I have to make a couple of comments on that whole story. So, number one, you mentioned when I was in beginning music theory, that was actually Frances Kathlena that was doing
Oh,
the
that's right.
beginning music
That
theory.
wasn't Julie.
Right, because and then she came in the year after when I actually joined
Thank
choir,
you.
and so
That's right.
it's always weird. We actually recently interviewed him for the podcast, and so it was just
Yeah.
crazy to go back and rethink through all that. But I was gonna say I remember walking in that very first time. I still remember it so vividly. Walking into the choir room, and even for just a beginning music theory class, like you could just feel the atmosphere, even though it wasn't an actual choral class at that moment. And then over time, just being there and being around you and a lot of the students in that class were still in choir. I just really got a feel for that atmosphere. So I'm a testament to the success of that vision you had for the choir program. So I'll always be a big proponent of that. Couple other things. Number one, I mean, hey, if you had told me when I was in your choir program that you'd one day be working in oil and manufacturing, I would have been like, what? No.
I know, me too.
Right.
Me too.
Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just like, whoa, that's crazy,
Yeah,
going
because
back in time.
people can, I mean, my parents, my mom especially, is still so weirded out that I'm not doing music. Like
Yeah.
regularly, she's like, "Well, aren't you ready to start a church job? And don't you want to just do a few students?" Because from infancy, my goal was to be a music educator.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny.
And then the other thing I was going to mention is I'll just say this to our listeners. She is so right when she's saying that she loves babies. Like there were a couple times I feel like an alumni or like a parent or like somebody would walk into the choir room just carrying a baby, and it didn't matter what we were doing, like we were in the middle of a song or what. No, like we're stopping right now so Miss Justice can go and hold the baby.
It's true. In my current job, I have a baby tax. So if I know you have a baby, you have to show me the latest picture before I help you with whatever task you need. I mean, I'll still help you, but I want to see. And my boss is all the time. He's like, "Well, did you pay the baby tax to the people at my desk?" Yeah, it's great. Works for me.
This is great, and it's been really cool to hear your side of kind of how you went through forming the choral program at Rouse, especially since for me, since I was a student, I was a part of that. I was on the receiving end of that, and it's really neat to have come all this way and to now hear kind of what you were thinking behind the scenes in doing that. And again, I'm sure I'll give more examples as we talk through this, but I think it's really important for people to hear that it's not always about the success that is measured by how many all-staters you have or what you get at UIL or things like that. And we've talked a lot about those things with different people on our show, and I think everybody recognizes the importance of those things. Like nobody's saying you shouldn't strive for those, because you need to push your students to be successful. But there's something to be said about the culture you create in the classroom, and how that's going to attract people. Now, we were talking a little bit before, we were emailing back and forth, and you kind of brought this up in terms of recruitment and retention for your program. You brushed on it a little bit when you were telling us that story. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of your philosophy and how that played out during the Rouse program?
Yeah. Listen, let me be clear. I want to win. I want all the awards. I want 100 all-staters. I don't want to get twos. I want to win. But that should not be my goal in the classroom. We're going to do everything we can to get there, but I want to make sure that every person in the room is along for the journey with me and realizes that's not the priority for the year. But I do want to win. And we did great, and we had a lot of excellent success, but that's really hard because as musicians, especially when you leave college, you're at your top. You've been singing with some of the best ensembles you will ever sing in. Your voice is the best it's ever been. You have spent 4 or 5 years just learning the minutia of how to be your very best musician. And then you go to a high school and you're like, oof, that's a lot of steps back. And so I think that's part of the reason why we get so competitive in competition area. I know that's not what you asked me, but I think because we're at that level when we graduate, that's the way we're going. Okay, so what I learned about recruiting and retention when I was teaching at Cedar Park Middle School, I thought, because I was still a young baby teacher, I thought I had to do all the bells and whistles for the incoming middle schoolers, or they wouldn't want to be in choir. I thought we got to have this event and this event, and this has got to be fun, and this has got to be perfect in the spring, and so we had to have all these activities. And then I had a dream, and I told my boys. They were like, "Oh, we're singing with the girls, and that's fine, the sixth graders, but wow, what can we do?" And I'm like, I've always wanted to have a men's choir, and I always call middle school boys men. I just do. They sit up better when you do. And I said, I've always wanted a men's choir, but our principal, Mrs. Stewart, says we have to have at least 25 sixth grade boys next year in order to do a men's choir. So, if your friends coming in want to do it, and it wasn't even like a recruiting thing. It was just it would be cool because then we could do literature that's more geared towards you, that you might enjoy more, not such the things that most of the girls in the room would like to do, so you're not playing that game at that point. And they're like, we can do it. We can do it. And I said, well, let's see what we do. And I think it was like 70. I had 70 boys sign up for a sixth grade choir. And once that happened at Cedar Park Middle School, still to this day, they have a huge amount of boys. It just became part of the culture. If you go to Cedar Park Middle School, you're either in band or you're in choir. That's it. And one is not more students than the other. And so when that happened, I went, whoa, that was not about the big flashy Christmas concert, which is fun. And it's not about, all of these extra flashy things. It was literally about find some kids that want to do something fun and want to build something. And it took off. And so I think that was my first lesson in retention, more important, because most of the kids that came in that year, especially, and then if you get the boys, the girls will follow. That's just the way it is, And so that the thing that happened was those boys in that class were neighbors, cousins, siblings. They all knew somebody who was already in choir. The good thing about that is you're not going to quit. My big brother's in choir, my cousins, all the neighborhood. Well, if Johnny's in, we all play football, we all do choir, we're all together. This is our friend group. A friend group chooses to do choir together. And I also made sure that they knew if you sign up for boys choir, you are all going to be in whatever period choir together. So all you and your friends are going to be in the same class. You're not going to not be with them. So you'll know for sure there's one class every day that you'll be with all your friends. And that's really how I learned that lesson. And then I just, because I want to win, I took that to the next level and did it with everything. And I just think it's just such human nature that we want to belong. I also learned that lesson from my youngest daughter. Her name's Lauren. She's adorable and she's super introverted. And one day she came home, I think it was her freshman year of high school. And I'm like, how was the day? And she's like, Mom, I don't think any adult in the entire school talked to me at all today. And I said, what? She's like, not one. I said, did you need them to? She said, not really. But then I thought, how many Laurens are sitting out there in those classrooms that no teacher acknowledged them because they're well-behaved. They do what they're told. They don't cause problems. They're the Karas, in the classroom. And you're like, and I thought, that's really sad because she's a pretty cool human being and they're missing out by not knowing her. And I literally had a moment of, okay. And I went back to my classroom the very next day and went, who have I not noticed lately? Some people demand attention, good and bad. Demand it because they're super talented, demand it because they have big personalities. But some people are not going to demand attention, and it's your job to find out who they are. And so I started doing that intentionally looking for the Laurens in the classroom. So that's kind of how that vision came for me. Recruiting is great, and it's important, especially your first year when they're figuring out who you are. When I left Cedar Park High School, everybody in Cedar Park knew Mrs. Justice and had somebody they knew that was in her classroom. When I went to Rouse, nobody in Leander knew me. And it was really weird. And I started from scratch and had to go, this is who I am. This is a safe place for you to be. This is what it looks like. And I had to start from there.
Okay. Would you like a way to create a special moment, a unique memory that only you and your students can share? Is there a certain audience you will be performing for and you want just the right type of music for the occasion? Or perhaps you're just in need of a piece that has a specific voicing, range, or theme that you haven't been able to find anywhere else. I mean, last time I checked, publishers weren't scrambling to create music for a bassoon, alto voice, and accordion trio, but maybe that's what you're looking for. No matter the reason or the instrumentation, I would love to fulfill your music needs in the form of a commission. If you're unfamiliar with what commissioning me would look like, or even any composer for that matter, you can learn more about the process at christianfortnermusic.com/commission. This includes info such as the step-by-step timeline, payment options, and more. I want to work with you so that we can create a memorable experience for everyone involved, including you, myself, the performers, and the listeners that will hear the music for years to come. Because remember, you never know whose lives will be changed for the better because of the music that came into existence because of you. So are you ready to make a new memory through new music? I am. Take the first step by filling out a commission request form at christianfortnermusic.com/commission. Hope to hear from you soon. Now, I do want to ask, you mentioned, so the example of all the boys, you went from, what was it, like less than 20, 25 to, 70, right? The next year or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like if that were me, like I'd be excited about that, but also I'd be like, oh no, is this going to be a behavior thing? Like what, I mean, what were
You know, I've never really, in general, not really had behavior issues. But I think that comes from, I did it in interesting ways. Like if there was a kid that was a problem, attention seeking behavior, right? Interrupting rehearsal because they were a problem. We might have a conversation. I might have to redirect their behavior, but I would do things like, boys, I need some help. I have a really important job. I need someone super responsible, super mature. It's really important. I need someone I can trust. And of course, all those big personality boys raise their hand. And I intentionally picked the guy in the back that nobody thought was responsible or trustworthy.
I've done that.
Intentionally. And the first time I did that, my assistant director went, "Why would you pick him?" And I'm like, "Just watch." And it was something like count some change, which I already knew how much it was. So if there was a problem, we would know. It was something like that. And that kid changed. We never had an issue after that because he did not think, I think he knew that I trusted him and I thought he was smart and I thought he was good and not a troublemaker. So sometimes you can't get around that. There's going to be dorks. There's going to be turds. You're just going to have to deal with it. I also had a full-time assistant director. So there were always two of us in the classroom. So one could literally be eyes on the boys and the other could be teaching the music. By yourself, 70 boys, woo, I don't recommend it. But you also have to understand, I know we're talking a lot about gender stuff, but at the 6th grade level, what focus looks like for a boy is way different than what focus looks like for a girl.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Of course, I think that might be true the whole way through. Mrs. Ard told me a story, showed me a video of her little boy. The preschool teacher says, "Hey, it's time to come sit in the circle time." And there's little squares of carpet and all the kids come and sit in their circle. He runs 3 laps, does an action roll, and then plants his tush right in the square. And I'm like, "Becky, he followed the rules. You didn't say he couldn't run 3 laps and do an action roll before he sat." I'm like, you don't teach middle school boys forever and ever and ever and not look at that and go, well, if you didn't want him to run, you should have said, walk slowly to the square.
Right. So going off of that, I mean, when it comes to this overall, recruitment and retention sort of thing, I mean, what kind of tips can you provide for people listening to this that might be, struggling with whether it's their first year or their 5th year or their 10th year at, whichever school or ensemble or size ensemble? I mean, for somebody that might be struggling with that or might not be sure what to do, what sort of advice would you offer for them in that situation?
I think my main advice is get to know you games don't work. Maybe at first because you can go, oh, Christian tells really long, boring jokes. I learned that about him.
That hasn't changed.
Oh my gosh.
That has not changed.
I don't even want to tell you about the long drive to show choir competition. I wasn't even sure I liked him anymore. Or I might learn Kara's really interested in whatever. Those little beginning get to know you games are not retention. They're not recruiting. They are nothing, but they may be a little nugget of information. I kind
Right.
of stopped doing those and started doing little cards. What do you wish people knew about you? What's something cool about you that other people don't know or wouldn't guess? And, and I'd always say, hey, by the way, don't tell me anything you don't want your parents to know. Keep it appropriate, keep it nice. And then I would just take those cards and then we would read them. Remember doing that? I don't know if we did that I think we
Oh,
did.
vaguely. I can't even
Every
remember.
at the beginning of class or at the end of class, the kids would be like, cards, cards. And I'd pull out a card and I'd go, this person really loves geckos. They have a bearded dragon. And the kids would guess who it was. And then we would let them take just a few minutes and tell us what they like about it. And then it does a couple of things. It takes hardly any time. It helps hey, next time, that was Jax. Next time Jax comes in the room, ask him about his bearded dragon, which I don't remember their names anymore. And it helps the other kids go, hey, I like that too. And it helps them start to build connections with each other. But little stuff, because introverted people do not like get to know you games, but they will write something interesting about themselves on a card. And show choir is the place where you do those really cool extroverted games. Those are all extroverted kids. They want to be the center of attention. Cool, do that there. But in your just basic JV mixed choir, especially on the first day, woo, they've already done that in every other class.
Right.
So it's about reading the room. It's about getting to know kids, and you got to get your butt at the door. You got to hold the door open and just say hi when they come in. They might not even make eye contact, but you got to be there. And when they leave, I used to just park myself by that door when kids were putting their folders away, and we weren't talking about anything. We were a lot of times just being goofy, but it matters. It's just stuff like that. It's taking the time to get to know them. Also because we're all performers, us music educators, we're performers. So we're used to being the center of attention and performing. But we have to remember in the instructor role, there has to come a time when you make a concerted effort to shine a light on the kids and get to know them.
So is that something that you do a lot more of at the start of the year or at the end of the year, or is it continue? I mean, what does that look like?
That card activity I'm talking about, we did that almost the whole first semester because we'd only read 1 or 2 cards a class period. And so when you finish the cards, we would pitch them out so we'd know which ones are next. And then new kids coming in get to fill out a card. So that took almost a semester. But even in general, I tend to be I interrupt rehearsal a lot. The kids learn right away that I'm going to stop and start. And it's not always about music. I might stop them and go, oh my gosh, did you see blah, blah, blah last night on TV? Or blah, blah, blah. Or have you ever heard about no? And then we literally take 30 seconds, 2 minutes to do something totally random. And then we're like, okay, measure 22. And the first couple of times you do that with a newbie, they're like, what? But as they get more used to you, they love those moments. They get a little brain break. You do a little something silly. They think they know you. I had lunch with, I don't know if Nona Bott was there when you were there. Had dinner with Nona. We met on Monday for dinner, and she's like, how's Mr. Justice? She really is like, oh, I remember you talking about Mr. Justice so much, and they really didn't know anything a whole lot about him, but I would say things like, listen, I'm cherished at home. My husband cherishes me, and I am not feeling cherished right now. I need you to go to measure 42. And, they think, oh, Mrs. Justice is married to Mr. Justice. And, they hear these little stories and stuff like that. Sometimes I would tell stories about other students, like a brave one, not a shy one. I'd be like, listen, I'm not going to say who it was, but this guy who likes to compose and he's in music theory and he sings bass too had a moment the other day, but we're not going to talk about Christian in front of the whole class. And I could do that with Christian because I know he would think that was funny and I would not tell anything personal, but it's just little moments like that to take a minute to just be human with people.
Yeah. I was going to say, I specifically remember, let's see, I remember the honky horn you brought back from TMEA one year.
Yeah.
And then I remember stopping the class and reading us a book about dragons and tacos.
Yeah. So this is unique. When I was in college, I had a toddler, and all of my electives I took in early childhood education because I wanted to be the best mama ever. And one of the things I was really focused on was early literacy. And one of my college professors, the first day of class, said, I'm going to read you a story. And he pulled out a children's book. And we were like 20 years old. sitting there with our coffees or whatever. And he reads us a children's book and we are fascinated. Nobody said a word. We're all staring at him. And he's like, everybody loves to be read to. And ever since then, in college, every now and then, I bring out a storybook. And I had a whole bunch of them, and I would tell them stories. And I have this total picture of Zach. I can't think of his name right now. Zach Smith. He's like a beard. He looks like a 25-year-old, and he's like 18, sitting on the floor, cross-legged in front of me. And I'm reading some children's story, and his mouth is open, and he's staring up, and nothing to do with music. But, I think it was Star Week and their brains were fried, and I wasn't going to get a really incredible focused rehearsal out of them anyway. So let's take a moment and read a story.
Yeah, I think it's important for students to see that their music teachers are not they're not music machines. They're still people.
Yeah. So mostly I just was myself. I think a lot of times we have a teacher persona, and we do. You can't be completely vulnerable and open with
Right.
your students all the time, but there has to be enough of your personality coming through. And those little things are what keeps kids in choir. So like, well, Mrs. Justice cares about me. She knows about my bearded dragons. Mrs. Justice cares about me. She looked at my composition. Mrs. Justice cares about me. She asked me about my mom, and I would always have random kids, just choir kids, but just walk in and sit in my desk, I might be teaching another class sitting there during lunchtime, and they're just in the choir room. And I'm like, that's a compliment. That means they feel safe. They feel comfortable. They're happy to be here. It's just, some of that was just a fluke. I figured out it as I was going.
Yeah, well, and I'll say, I mean, the more I think about it, when I really think back to when I was in choir there, I really didn't see you a lot outside of school because like you said, there weren't a lot of outside events and things like that, and I mean obviously concerts and those kinds of things. I mean obviously you were there, but there wasn't a whole lot of that extra elaborate setup. But the more I think about it, it's kind of like there didn't need to be, right? Because it's like I was excited to just come to school and go to choir. In fact, I think there were many days I didn't even think about like, oh, I'm going to school today. It was, oh, I'm going to choir today.
That's
Especially
awesome.
in our district, we had that block schedule, so it was AB days, and so especially it was like, oh, it's an A day. All right, choir today. So that was really nice as well. You mentioned something earlier. You said something along the lines of you poured a lot of resources and focus into your JV groups. And I was in one of the JV groups my first year, which was junior year. So I kind of got to experience a bit of that. But what exactly do you mean by that? That kind of stuck out to me when you were talking about that.
Yeah. When you come to Rouse High School, when I was there were no auditions for incoming ninth graders. All incoming ninth graders went into a JV mixed choir. I did that for a couple of reasons. One was I had a different idea of what a soprano was and an alto was than one of my feeder middle schools. And hers wasn't wrong and it wasn't bad. Middle school girls' voices are the same, really. The range is not much different, but the timbre that she preferred for soprano, I preferred for alto. And so that causes a lot of drama when you've been in sixth grade, you've been a soprano the whole time, and now Mrs. Justice wants you to sing alto. So that was kind of how I dealt with that too. And with boys, your voice is sometimes you're a tenor, sometimes you're a bass. It depends on the day. So I did that for that reason. I also did it because I wanted a chance to get to know them before I put them in an advanced choir. There are kids in middle school choir that stay in JV that really don't mature until right before ninth grade. Well, if I had gone, well, their middle school teacher says they're a JV singer, so I'm going to keep them in JV, they might never progress to the varsity level. But if we start everybody at the JV level and go, okay, these are the skills you have to move up. If you want to move up, you got to conquer these skills. So I do that way. I also did it for the same purpose of, that sixth period, you are going to have a class at high school with all your friends. So you can count on that. You can know on B days, you're going to have a class with me. You're going to have a class with your friends. We're all going to be there. So I did that. It also is a way to bring in kids who move from other places. I don't know if you know this, but I've never had a kid move to Rouse from another state that wasn't in their top group. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they told me.
Right.
So I'm always like, okay, great, but you're going to start here, and then we'll move on from that. And so I kind of did it for a lot of reasons, and also not to make a beginner coming into high school have to audition for the high school teacher. That can be intimidating too. You could be a super talented singer, and then you're thinking, my whole high school career depends on this one moment. Nah, I don't want to do that either. And so that's kind of the reason why I did it. And then we use the JV choirs to teach skills. I don't teach sight reading at the varsity level. I give you things to challenge you and make you crash and burn and fall apart. But really, you should have sight reading skills at the high school level by the time you get to be a junior or senior and in a varsity group. So you're not really teaching skills. I'm going to say that if you have a really good feeder program, you don't really teach a lot of sight reading skills at the JV level. You just teach them how to sight read at a bunch of different keys. And maybe more than just the 1-4-5 chord. You might throw the 6 in there a little bit. So that was the other reason, was to get everybody on same page for sight reading. And I liked it. They liked it. We loved it. It turned out to be a great experience. Every now and then I'd have a few, usually girls, going, but I wanted to be in varsity my freshman year. If I went to this school, I could be in varsity. I'm like, that's cool. I know. Sorry. And then we would just go on with it.
Right.
So, and the other thing is, as the head director, I felt very, very responsible for being active in the JV choir. I wasn't the lead teacher for that class, but I was in the room. I'm taking attendance. I'm at the piano playing notes, helping the assistant director. I didn't want it to be I only get Mrs. Justice as my teacher if I'm good enough, or I only get to be on this when this happens. No, we team teach everything all the way. I might not choose your literature. I might not be the decider for your class. I might not even run rehearsal, but I'm here, and I'm still at the door, even though it's not technically my choir. I'm still greeting you at the door both ways.
It's that's so true, and I honestly I'd kind of forgotten about it now that you bring it up. That when I was in JV that first year, I mean, technically Miss Rhodes was the director of that class specifically, but I mean, I remember seeing you, I mean, all throughout that time as well. Like I by the time I was in varsity choir my senior year, I mean, it just felt natural. I mean, it wasn't like a sudden jarring change in that kind of way. And I'd imagine, I think you're exactly right. I imagine there's a lot of JV groups out there that just feel like they don't have the attention of the head director. And that's really important.
Well, and then the other thing you do is, when everybody in your varsity choir has also been in your JV choir, that's very different, isn't it? We won't be talking disrespectfully about JV choirs because that was you last year.
Right.
We encourage them. We are happy for them, and they could be sitting next to you next year. So that also really changes the culture on us and them. And I had some kids who never auditioned for varsity. They liked JV mix so much they did not want to move up. And that was okay. They were welcome to do that. Some super talented kids I wished would have moved up because I needed their voice part in the advanced group, but I let them make their own decision about what they wanted to do with that.
Can you speak on that a little bit more? I mean, I think that's really key too, because I mean, you're not the one calling the shots on, no, you're going to be in this choir, you're going to be in this choir. You're leaving that decision up to them. I mean, what's the thought process behind that? I mean, how necessary, I guess, is there ever a time where you need to do that? Like, you need to be the dictator, you could say, and move people over. Do you think that's ever necessary?
I think it depends on your program and your kids, but I never did that because I figured one of two things would happen. If I tell you you're so good, you're going into varsity choir, even though you don't want to, then you come in the room and you maybe think you don't have to work as the other guy because you're good and Mrs. Justice purposely put you in here and you didn't even have to audition. I don't want to deal with that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, that's that two paths. There's going to be the Kara who wants to be music major. Then there's going to be the kid who just likes to sing and wants to be with their friends. That's okay. And so you have to ask yourself, well, am I going to walk the walk? If I'm going to focus on JV and say JV is a building block for all programs, if I have a kid that's very happy and wants to stay there, then it really will go against what you're saying if you force them to move into another group.
Right. And I imagine it forces them to be a little more responsible, take responsibility for how they are in the choir as well. Because, I feel like if some students were to see that happen, they might say, well, if I'm going to be in varsity, I mean, Miss Justice will move me over if I'm good enough to be in varsity, or something like that, kind of
Yeah.
taking off some of the responsibility on their end.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely you have to earn it. You have to earn it. You have to be there. Some kids need some encouragement because you tell them they're great. They feel they're great. They hear they're great. But to have to do a one-on-one sight reading with me to audition to get in is more scary than anything in the whole wide world. So have encouraged those kids to give it a try, and you don't even, and I would make everybody come do the audition, even if they weren't going to move up or wanting to move up, because I said the way we can do this is nobody has to know you auditioned.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody has to know you tried out for varsity and didn't make it. This is just between you and me in this practice room. So what does it hurt to try? And so a lot of times that would help those hesitant students kind of take the risk and give it a try. And sometimes it didn't. And they were like, heck, no way. I'm staying here. And I'm like, okay.
Sure. I remember I had friends that were like that. And I mean, that was okay. And a lot of times it helps to have those students in the JV groups anyway. I mean, as leaders.
They're incredible leaders, and they can read and they can sing, and yeah. And I think it also may be one of the few places where they can be leaders. If you are a junior and you're in JV choir and you've been there a couple of years, you know the lay of the land, and I can rely on you. And that might be the only place in the building where you get to be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, this has been great so far. I mean, it's been like 45 minutes already. That went by fast, but I mean, I think this has been great so far. I mean, is there anything else that you really feel like you want to share with our listeners?
I think just in general that, I think I'm right about retention. I think I'm right. I think it's opposite of what is instinctual to you. And I think it's opposite of what a lot of people do in their programs. But I think the main thing is you got to be genuine. You got to be who you are. And the rules apply to you that apply to the kids. And I tell that to them on day one. Listen, you're not allowed to speak to me in a rude tone of voice, but guess what? I'm not allowed to speak to you in a rude tone of voice. We're not going to do that to each other. And you're not allowed to chew gum. Guess what? I'm not either. And I think that also helps with retention. They feel respected, they feel valued, they feel safe. And I think, I don't know, when I was a young teacher, I knew I felt like I've got to set my authority. Nah. I learned after about a decade of teaching that, nah, of course I have to have authority in a dangerous situation or a potentially dangerous situation, right, or, things like that. But ultimately, in a rehearsal, we're just going to have mutual respect for each other, but that just comes with just being real, just being yourself and just being genuine with kids, because they can see right through it. And then you're going to have a mega behavior problem because they're going to go, she didn't really mean it. She didn't really care about me. Well, she still talks rude to me. Why can't I talk rude to her? And we've all seen adults like that. We've seen kids like that. And I just think in general, you want to hear a funny story?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to have a rule that if you call your parents in front of me and you talk to them in a rude tone of voice, we have a problem. And I would get on the phone and talk to the parent and say, oh, parent. So I'm going to tell you about Claire. So Claire's dad had been deployed a long time, and he came back, and she was back to living with her dad. And he was late picking her up from an event. And she calls him on the phone in front of me, and she's just like, Dad, I can't believe it. You were supposed to be here. No. And I'm like, give me the phone, Claire. So I got on the phone with Dad. Claire's now a mom of 2, and she laughs about this. I got on the phone with Dad, and I'm like, oh, hey, Dad. Claire's having a rough time not speaking to you very politely, so she told me she was going to do the dishes for the next 3 days to make it up to you. And her face is shocked, and her dad's laughing. I'm like, I'm going to give the phone back to Claire now. Give the phone back to Claire, and Claire's laughing. She's like, yes, Dad, I'll do the dishes for the next 3 days. And I'm sorry I was not talking in a nice tone of voice to you. And so it's just part of that same thing. This is not just a rule in this classroom. This is a rule for how you should behave with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to enforce it even when you're not speaking to me,
Right.
And just in general, that we just need to treat each other nicely. I love that story because she just had her second baby about 6 months ago. And so I'm like, I bet she's going to be having some conversations in the next few years.
Well, I think that's all summed up in another memory I'll bring up is at the end of our spring concert, the pop show, as some would call it, we would always end after the bows had happened and everyone's clapping. We would blast up on the overhead, "I Can Be Your Friend" from VeggieTales. And I think that just kind of sums up the whole feel of the choir. It's just being friends.
Yeah. Well, singing is really vulnerable. It's your personality. And, if you make a wrong note on an instrument, you're like, "Stupid instrument,"
Right.
or, "Oh, I just didn't get it." But when you make a sound that you don't love with your voice, it can feel personal. It can feel like I'm bad because I made this sound. And so when you make ridiculous sounds and you just go, "Well, that's not what I meant to be," or, "Whew, let's try that again," and you just acknowledge it and move on, it's just all part of that culture of we can take risks together. We still like each other. We can be friends. We can take care of each other. But ultimately, it's just choir. That's my philosophy. That was my motto for a long time. It's just choir. Not curing cancer, not making world peace happen. It's just choir. It's important and it's fun and it's special, but it's not the most important thing that's happening today. The most important thing is Christian came to a school where he didn't know anybody, and he made friends, and he found people that took him under their wings, and people he might never have made friends with if he hadn't been in choir. That's what's most important. And now he's a really famous composer, and he's going to take off and be awesome. And if Christian hadn't been in choir, he might not have met his super cool wife. So, that's way more important than any song he ever sang, or times when he missed a note, And I think if we remember that, I think that'll make a big difference for everybody.
Yeah, I try to emphasize, especially with like my varsity girls group. Last year, I think I was sharing like a memory of me and my girlfriends from choir, and that they were all in my wedding. And we still hang out to this day. And I try to emphasize, like, choir is where you make your best friends, and I hope that's. Yep. And I tell them, like, I hope that's what I'm doing for you right now. Because that's all I remember. Most of it was just being with them and doing everything and going through everything together with them. And that was because of choir.
Yep. There's something really like spiritual about singing together, about corporate singing, even if it's solfege, even if there's something really, really spiritual about that connection that happens between you and me when we're sitting next to each other and we're making music together. And I think, as many kids as you can get involved in that, you are going to make a difference in your culture, in your classroom, in your school, in your community. And you raise, kids, and people like Claire become mamas someday. And she still remembers a story about when she was a teenager and wasn't very sweet to her dad, and make sure her kids speak nice to her too. It's wonderful. And that makes me happy. And honestly, I feel such joy, talking to Christian and following him and following you, Kara, and seeing what you do and all the things that are happening. That makes me happy. I'm like, that's a little spark that happened a long time ago in a classroom at Rouse High School. That's kind of a miracle. And that's happening in music classes all across the world. It's not happening in algebra.
That's right.
For sure.
Definitely. No, it's not how I remember it. So
No, me neither.
Well, I think that's a great segue and kind of how I want to wrap this up. I've shared this before on the podcast a long time ago, but I thought I got to share it, my story again, a specific part of my story of when I was a student at Rouse. I mean, it's like my sophomore year, I was in that beginning music theory class. And so I'd kind of gotten to know you and the choir atmosphere. And I eventually made a couple of friends and so I finally got to the point at the end of the spring that I was like, okay, I think I'll sign up for choir. I'll give it a shot. I was pretty nervous, at the time, but and then like a week or two later was when the spring sing happened, the spring pop show, and I remember just being in the audience of that and just the lights dimming and then the curtain opening up and the lights coming up and you had like all 200 students in the program, from every single group, all standing there together, just not even wearing a unified t-shirt. It was just a bunch of colorful, bright t-shirts. And they started singing just some, I remember what it was. It was just some pop tune or something, right? It wasn't nothing complex, right? But for me as a sophomore, just seeing that image and hearing them all together, I think that everything you've been talking about and that you've been describing this whole time, that just kind of exploded. It just came over me, right? Like just seeing that. And like, that was just such a moving moment. And like, that was the moment I realized, okay, no, I want to be a part of this. Like, I'm not in denial anymore, right? Like I want to do this. And then sure enough, I joined the next year the rest is history. I mean, that's what set me on the course to, where we are now. And so, I mean, that's just something I've always been grateful for. And then as you know, I even wrote my very first choral piece about that experience called Voices of Sun. And that was also the very first,
sweet.
yeah. And that was the very first piece that ever got premiered, that I wrote as well from the Hardin Simmons Choir. So it was just a testament. I just want to share that as a testament to what you've been sharing is so true. Like, it does work. It can work. And I'm a living example of that. So I can testify.
You, Christian. And I just think it's Jesus.
Yeah.
I just believe that so much. I was supposed to be at that school for that time with those kids that came in the room, and hopefully not all of them, but hopefully some of them, I made a moment better for them. And then hopefully they took that and then made a moment better for someone else. And then exponentially things changed in their world just a little bit, maybe for that day, maybe long term. But what educators do is so important and so hard. But if you just keep remembering that the person is more important than the singer, I think that is what transforms programs.
Amen. Perfect. Well, we got to wrap it up with that. That's the best final, wrap it up in a nice bow right there. That's awesome.
There you go.
Well,
thanks.
Before we wrap it up, I do want to ask if there's anybody out there that's listening to this and they're like, wow, that is really good stuff. I kind of want to, try this, but I'm not sure exactly how to move forward. I mean, is there a good way that people can contact you or get a hold of you if they want some advice?
They can email me, and you can put it on, and it's brendacjustice@gmail.com. And then I'll share my phone number with you, and I'm happy to talk. I've mentored lots of people. I'm happy to continue doing it. And it makes me happy too, because I feel like that just exponential love, caring for people just keeps going.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Miss Justice, for being here. It's been amazing. And we'll definitely have to have you on again sometime for sure.
It'll be fun. I love you both. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Beyond the Measure, a podcast for music educators. We hope you learned something that will help you stress less about how to teach so that you can focus more on who you're teaching. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating and review, subscribe, and share this podcast with other music educators. See you in the next one.